Tonight on CFTK-TV News, BC Premier David Eby gave his own address at the UBCM convention. A former federal cabinet minister is trying to create a new BC political party, and a report looks into how BC's fishing industry could look quite different soon.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin. Here's what's making news in the Northwest and beyond for today. In a recent report, it was disclosed that the Terrus Spirit North program was unfortunately the victim of theft during the previous week. Back on September 11th, the program, whose purpose is to give out various bits of sporting equipment to both on-reserve and public schools throughout all of BC, saw 13 of their bikes and 19 of their helmets get stolen from them. Since they weren't in use as the program was on a break, the bikes were being stored in a trailer on some private property, and the thief or thieves got access to it by knocking over a fence, then making their way into said trailer. There has since been public urging to watch out for the bikes being potentially put up for sale by someone else. The RCMP are seeking public assistance in locating 7-year-old Oakland Schwetter, who has gone missing from her residence on South Bank in Burns Lake. Oakland was last seen outside her residence at 6 p.m. yesterday, where she was wearing a red and blue plaid dress, leggings with white bow ties, and pink socks. Oakland is also on the autism spectrum and is nonverbal. Police have numerous resources in the area, including search and rescue liaising with Oakland's family and looking for her, but if anyone has information on the whereabouts of Oakland, they are urged to contact their local police or BC Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. It was a full house at Canada Place as delegates at the Union of BC Municipalities Convention waited to hear from Premier David Eby. With the election period kicking off on Saturday, they were eager to see if he had any last-minute goodies for them. But as CTV's Penny Daflos reports, they were disappointed.
It was standing room only at the exhibition hall as mayors, councillors, and others waited to hear from the premier.
If I seem a little bit more stressed out than usual this year, it's only because I have a 2-month-old and we're 2 days from the election starting, campaign starting. I can't believe we're 14 diapers away from the campaign period.
After warming up the crowd, David Eby took his time reminding them about what his government has done in recent years.
We've added more homes per capita than any province over the last 7 years. We're building 4 times more rental housing than the province of Ontario.
Attacking his Conservative rivals.
Now is the time that we need to be building, not cutting.
And taking a handful of questions from delegates.
What would your party do to address community infrastructure?
We're working with UBCM on a review of how we structure local government financing.
The event was a far cry from the kind of appearance that used to fire up municipal leaders.
By 1 o'clock this afternoon, the tolls and the Coquihalla are going for good.
I think some of the delegates were a little bit disappointed that there was nothing new and substantive from you today. Why is that?
We're not in a position to be making platform announcements right now, many of which will have significant positive impacts for local governments. But the good news is, in a short period of time, they will have access to our full platform with all of the commitments we're making.
The week-long UBCM convention ends tomorrow. The leaders of the BC Green and BC Conservative parties will close out the event, making their case to delegates just hours before the provincial election campaign formally begins. Penny Daflos, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up next, some relief has come for the Airbnb rates in Vancouver. Welcome back. Public safety is a top priority for many across BC, and it's expected to be one of the top issues discussed in our upcoming election. But how are politicians going to make our province safer? CTV's Ben Milger asked each of the parties their plans on how to deal with violence and street disorder.
December will be 24 years.
Jeff Martin opened this Hornby Street clothing store in 2000. He says in recent years, some customers are afraid to shop downtown.
Eroding that customer base in the downtown core due to safety, then small independent guys like me, it's tougher and tougher.
It's a message echoed by Downtown Van. The business association in the city centre is calling on all parties in the upcoming provincial election to lay out comprehensive plans to combat violence, intimidation, and general disorder. None of the three main parties have released their platforms yet, but the NDP and the Conservatives have both put out plans for involuntary mental health and addictions treatment.
It's not a huge number of people, but they can cause a huge amount of chaos.
There's not a one-size-fits-all model, but there is hope for people who are addicted to drugs, that there is recovery options for them.
The Greens, who do not support involuntary treatment, did not make anyone available for an interview. Public safety and perceptions of public safety appear to be issues that will dominate the campaign trail.
People are feeling on edge. That's what I'm hearing. We have real solutions.
We'll have more to say as we get into the campaign period about how we'll provide additional support for downtown cores and some of the issues that these businesses are grappling with around public safety.
Martin will be listening carefully, hoping one party or another can provide practical solutions before more independent businesses close up shop.
That's the backbone of retail, I think, and it brings the flavor and the coolness to the downtown, and you don't want to get rid of us guys, you know? So I think they better figure it out.
Each of the parties promises they'll have more to say on public safety during the campaign. Ben Milger, CTV News, Vancouver.
Notoriously known as the most expensive place to rent in the country, rates in Vancouver are higher than anywhere else across Canada. But some relief is now here, with new researching pointing to one big change driving down prices. Here's CTV's Martin McMahon.
Looking at data for BC in 2023, researchers found rents were $110 cheaper than without the restrictions.
Households in British Columbia have been seeing actually quite substantial decreases in monthly rent that can be explained because of short-term rental rules that are in place.
The report authors point out this is due to rules brought in by municipal governments before more recent provincial changes. If the province-wide changes have the same effect, the head of the research group expects rents will be $41 less than they would have been without.
And if we apply that to what the province has done, we should expect something on the order of $600 million a year in rent savings.
But short-term rental operators argue the reality on the ground is different.
This is just another report that was funded by the Hotel Association of British Columbia. If you look at real live data, like the city of Vancouver, where we were regulated in 2018, where rents have increased 40% since 2017, despite working very closely with the city and ensuring enforcement and compliance of those rules in the city, we haven't seen these kinds of results.
And while Airbnb and other critics have suggested short-term rental units aren't driving long-term rental prices, the housing minister insists this is proof restrictions work.
Well, there's 53,000 short-term rentals right now in British Columbia. That's 53,000 homes that are being used as mini hotels when they could be available for people in our community. Even 10,000 of those coming back to the market will have an impact.
Yeah, so it's really important that we take a regional and provincial approach to these matters, because the problem could be if you do a change in one municipality, it'll have a sort of an inverse change in the other municipality. So we kind of all need to be in it together.
The election could have major ramifications for what happens next, though. BC Conservative leader John Rustad has pledged to give power back to municipalities on short-term rental rules, a move away from the province-wide approach taken by the NDP government. Martin McMahon, CTV News, Vancouver.
Despite rejections from Elections BC, a former federal cabinet minister is still pushing ahead to build a new Liberal Party in BC, which is one example of the implosion of BC United having all kinds of ripple effects, including creating a battle for voters in the political middle and leaving some candidates paying twice for campaign sides. CTV's Rob Buffum explains further.
Former federal Liberal cabinet minister Herb Dhaliwal wants to fill the gap left by the collapse of BC United.
This polarization is not good for British Columbia. British Columbians need another choice.
Elections BC has rejected the idea because a similar name is already registered. The previous name for Kevin Falcon's rebranded BC United.
I think what's happening is very undemocratic. You can't have one party hold hostage other options for British Columbia.
Elections BC says the rules don't allow Falcon or anyone to release a name that's been registered in the past 10 years.
The middle is a mess right now. And the question is, where will those voters go? How will they seek representation? Who will get there first?
Former BC United candidate Corinne Kirkpatrick is running as an independent. She likes the idea in principle of a return to the BC Liberals on the scene, but says it's too late, with the deadline for registering any party 2 days away.
The practicality of it right now doesn't make any sense. I would just much prefer people to kind of tools down right now and focus on getting some of us moderate independents elected.
The impact of BC United suspending its campaign is wide-sweeping. Candidates, including Megan Brame and Esquimalt Colwood, who decided not to run, have a garage full of signs and merchandise, such as clothing, they bought through campaign donations.
Whether they want it back or whether I donate it to, a local, shelter for, I have a lot of T-shirts and hats that I'm sure somebody could wear.
Other former BC United candidates running now as independents, including MLA Tom Shapitka, are forced under the Election BC rules to pay BC United a second time for campaign signs if they want to now reuse them, with the old logo covered as independents.
These new nuances that keep coming up all the time seem to be a little frustrating.
As for Dollywall, he says he plans to consider legal options and won't go down without a fight.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast will deal with rain as well as a low at 11 degrees. The Terrus area should see rain too, but with a low at 9 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District is expected to have a chance of showers with a low at 3 degrees. On the north coast, the week for them will consist of all rain and clouds, plus a high moving between 15 and 12 degrees. In the Terrus area, the upcoming week will also see nothing but rain and clouds, while the high bounces from 12 to 15 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so is set to similarly see clouds and rain as the high shifts from 14 to 17 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is bridge maintenance, other maintenance, utility work, construction work, line painting, and paving operations. Highway 37 has some maintenance and roadside brushing, and there is some construction work on the Nishka Highway. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, an iconic BC bridge unfortunately burnt down in a possibly suspicious incident. Welcome back. A piece of BC history has gone up in flames as the iconic Red Bridge in Kamloops has been destroyed, collapsing into the river, and police are treating the blaze as suspicious. As CTV's Yasmin Ganda reports, this isn't the first fire on the bridge this week.
Residents in Kamloops were woken up just after 3 a.m. by what sounded like a fallen tree.
I got up and we looked out the window in the hall, and that's where we saw that the big plumes going up, and we could see the orange hue of the fire.
That's when she realized the Red Bridge, a historic landmark in the city, had been destroyed.
We could hear the crackling of the wood, and you could smell it. The smell was quite prominent, still is. I work fairly close to where the bridge is as well, so I can still smell it.
Police are investigating the blaze as suspicious. It's the second fire, with a blaze earlier this week forcing a temporary closure of the bridge, a route regularly used by commuters, sometimes 8,000 a day in the city.
We're absolutely concerned about what the impact of this will be, both for residents and also for businesses. There are businesses on both sides of the bridge who certainly depend on that traffic and that flow through.
The aftermath still continues, with smoke in the air and debris floating in the river as the community mourns an iconic structure.
This is a very challenging day for Kamloops and a really sad one. The Red Bridge is a treasured icon in our community, a lot of memories that people have in that particular place, and this fire happened very quickly.
The 88-year-old wooden bridge connected downtown Kamloops with the Tk'emlúps Indian Band, and for nearby residents, it will mean extra time on the roads.
There's a lot of frustration at what's to come, really, because it's not like it's going to be rebuilt overnight. So we're going to be struggling with this probably for the next couple of months.
For now, the community is left in limbo with no timeline on when a new bridge will be rebuilt. Police are asking anyone with information about the fire to contact them as they continue their investigation. Yasmin Gandham, CTV News, Vancouver.
The future of aquaculture in British Columbia will look different now that open-net salmon farms must be phased out in 5 years. CTV's Ben Milger went to a land-based fish farm and has more on how that technology provides one possible solution for the industry.
I'm here on the banks of the Nimkish River. According to oral traditions passed down through the generations, salmon from these waters have sustained the Numgis people for more than 14,000 years. But the future of what was once an abundant food source is now uncertain. Many in Numgis First Nation leadership believe open-net fish farms are impacting wild salmon stocks along with overfishing and climate change. That's part of the reason the First Nation built this aquaculture facility. It once farmed Atlantic salmon, but now produces steelhead.
We're currently harvesting 4 tons a week, and that's roughly 2,000 pieces. So there's roughly 2,000 fish in this tank.
To reduce potential impacts to wild salmon, the federal government has given open-net salmon farms along the coast 5 years to transition to closed containment systems. And this is one example of what that could look like. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans will release a draft transition plan soon, and people around here are worried it still won't do enough to protect wild stocks.
Our creation story has to do with salmon, you know. It's absolutely in our DNA. Our health is impacted by it, you know.
Members of the Numgis First Nation anxiously await the DFO's transition plan, wondering what the details will mean not only for the future of aquaculture, but also wild salmon. Ben Milger, CTV News, near Port McNeill.
BC's police watchdog has been called in after a woman was shot and killed by a police officer in Surrey's Cloverdale neighborhood. CTV's Ben Nesbitt reports.
Some residents of this neighborhood heard the gunfire pop off early this morning. Now we're learning it came from the gun of a member of the RCMP inside of this home. Police say they arrived here to the 6200 block of 180A Street at around 4:40 a.m. Mounties say they discovered a woman had barricaded herself inside a room and was reportedly holding a weapon next to a young child. Police say at around 5:30 a.m., while interacting with the woman, an officer shot her. First responders attempted to give medical assistance, but authorities say the woman died at the scene. Neither the police or the Independent Investigations Office have said what transpired in the final moments before the officer fired their gun. Several people who say they know a woman living in the house are angry at what transpired.
All kinds of resources they can use. Tasers they can use to destabilize the mother, but using guns as a first thing.
Police, they carry a lot of tools and resources, and we don't see how someone who doesn't have a gun have to be killed.
The IIO will now look to determine if the officer's actions were justified. Ben Nesbitt, CTV News, Surrey.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is down 1/100 of a cent. The price of gold is up $31.60. Oil is down 16 cents. Natural gas is up 12 cents. Aluminum is up $3. In Toronto, the TSX is up 1.10 points. The Venture Index is up 2.19. In New York, the Dow Jones is up 38.17, and NASDAQ is down 65.66. Still ahead is a look at some of the factors going into a possible BC transportation program. Welcome back. Should teenagers be able to take transit for free? Some local politicians are asking to make it happen, but as CTV's Reagan Hasegawa shows us, the initiative could cost tens of millions of dollars.
Transit is currently free for kids 12 and under, but the Union of BC Municipalities wants the province to pay for youth all the way through to grade 12.
They will grow up, they will become adults that are paying regular fare, and we need to have better transit adoption to ensure that our transit systems are sustainable into the future.
Transit says making teens free would cost $30 million a year.
Not everybody needs it to be free. I would be more supportive of something that has some form of income test to it.
And that was the recommendation of a report presented to the Mayor's Council on Regional Transportation back in June. TransLink is currently facing a funding gap of approximately $600 million each year starting in 2026.
I recognize that transit has funding issues, but taking funding from our 14 and 16-year-olds is not the solution.
I think it should be free. We don't earn our own money yet, and I think government should help a little bit.
We reached out to the Ministry of Transportation for comment, but did not hear back by deadline. Reagan Hasegawa, CTV News, Burnaby.
CT scanners are being used at Canada's airports for security screening, meaning travelers can soon leave liquids, medical devices, and large electronics in their carry-ons. The Canadian Air Transport Security Authority made the announcement in Vancouver, where the first installation of the new technology was installed. President Nana Simon says the CT scanners will improve security effectiveness and improve passenger experiences across Canada. Additional CT equipment installments are planned at other airports starting this fall and will be phased in over several years. That's all our news for now. From everyone at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching.